Hi, welcome to this hands-on session on SQL. I am Aliza Tanveer and in this video we will have a look at some date manipulation functions. The date manipulation functions that we are going to use in this video are date add, date subtract, date difference, year, month, day, last day, now and current day. Let's see how these functions actually work. I have opened MySQL Workbench as I'll be using MySQL. Most of these functions are same in MySQL and SQL, but please remember that some of these functions may have a different definition or number of parameters in SQL Server. We'll start by looking at the date add function, and for that I am going to use this query. Here I am going to apply the date add function on a date having a timestamp as well, and inside the interval parameter I am going to add 25 minutes. So this date add function is going to add an interval of 25 minutes into this provided date. Let's execute the query to see the new time, and you can see here that the time that we provided was 9:20, and after adding an interval of 25 minutes now the new time is 9:45. Let's see another query. Here in this query we have again passed a date and time interval. For the next parameter where we have to define an interval, I have used a -2. This means that I want to subtract 2 hours from the time interval. Since by default the date add function adds the interval value, so if we use a negative sign with the interval, it means that it is going to subtract this value from the date and time value. So in this query I'm going to subtract 2 hours from the provided date. Let's execute the query to see the result. And now you can see that initially our time was 9:34, and after subtracting 2 hours now it is 7:34. Okay, similarly we can use this query to subtract month, years, millisecond, microseconds as well. Now let's see how to subtract a month from the time and the date. For that I'm going to use this query. Here once again I have passed a simple date into the function, and for the interval I have again used a negative value. So this negative value indicates I'm going to subtract 2 months from the provided date. So the current month is 6. After subtracting 2 months the new month should be 4. Let's execute the query, and you can see that now the current month has changed from 6 to 4 after subtracting 2 months from the provided date. Now let's use the second function, which is the date subtract function. It is similar to date add function, but this function subtracts an interval from a given timestamp. And to see how the date subtract function actually works, I am going to use this query. Here I am applying the date subtract function on a date having year, month and date, and the second parameter, which is the interval, I have provided an interval of 10 days. So this function is going to subtract 10 days from the provided date. Let's execute the query, and now you can see that the date has changed from 15 to 5, which shows that 10 days have been subtracted from the provided date. Okay, let's see another query. In this query I have again provided a date and timestamp, and for the interval I have added an interval of 2 hours. So this function is going to subtract 2 hours from the given date and timestamp. Okay, let's execute the query, and now you can see that in this time interval the time was 9:34, and after subtracting an interval of 2 hours now the time has changed to 7:34. Okay, and just like we can use the date add function to subtract an interval also, similarly we can also use the date subtract function to add an interval into the date or timestamp. For that we are going to use this query. In this example I have provided an interval of -2 months, since this function already subtracts. So subtracting a negative value gives a positive value, so minus minus gives plus. So when I'm going to use a negative value inside a date subtract function, it is actually going to add this value inside the provided value. Let's execute the query to see the result. And you can see now the interval of 2 months has been added to the current date. Okay, so this is how the date stub function works. We'll move towards the third function, which is the date difference function, and for that I am going to use this query. Here I have provided two parameters. The first parameter is a date and the second parameter is also a date. So this date difference function is going to give me the difference between the two dates in terms of number of days. Let's execute it, and you can see that it has provided me a difference of 40 days because this date has 25 date and a month 7, and this date has 15 date and a month 6. So the difference between these two becomes 40. Let's see another query. In this query, once again I have provided a date, but this time I have also added a timestamp into both of the dates. But this timestamp has no effect on the date difference function. This function is only going to look at the dates. So execute the query to see the difference between these two dates in terms of number of days. And you can see that it has shown me that there is a difference of 182 days between the two dates. Let's move towards the fourth function, which is the year function, and for that I'm going to use this query. Here I have applied the year function on a date, and it is going to return me year in a 4-digit value. Execute the query and you will see that it will extract the year part from the query. Similarly, we can use the month and day function on the similar date to extract the month and day respectively. Let's use the month function first. Execute the query and you will see that it is going to give me the month part. But this function has a limitation that it is only going to detect or identify the functions between 1 to 12, which are the valid functions. So if I change the month value to 13 or let's say 14, execute the query, and now it is going to give us null because the months are only between 1 to 12. And same goes for date, that if I, let's see the day function first. If I execute this on the simple date, it is going to extract the date. But if I change the date to a value other than 1 to 31, let's say 35, and I execute the query, it is going to give me an error because the dates can be between 1 to 31 values. Let's move towards the next function, which is the last day function. For that I'm going to use this query. Here I have used the last day function on a date, and it is going to return me the last date for the particular month. Let's execute the query and it is going to show me that the last date for this month will be 36/2022. We can also use this function on a date having a timestamp as well, but timestamp is not going to have much difference on the output, and it is still going to extract the last day on the basis of month. Let's execute the query and you will see that it has given me null because here I have provided the month to be 13, but in reality the months are between 1 to 12. So you have to provide a valid value of month in order to get the last day from this function. Let's move towards our second last function, which is the now function. And the now function is going to provide me the current date and time stamp, and for that I'm going to use this query. Here simply I'm going to apply the now function. This function does not have any arguments and I'm going to display it as current time. Execute the query and it is going to show me the current date and the timestamp. Okay, you can use this now function on different parameters as well, or you can add or subtract a value from the current date and time value. So for example, I have added 1 in after the now function. So let's see how this works. Execute the query and you can see that it has added 1 to the current minute. Okay, so the now function adds a 1 to the last value provided. Let's move towards our last function, which is the current date function. And for that, I am going to use this query. The current date function is similar to the now function, with the difference being that now function returns the current date and timestamp both, but the current date function returns only the current date. Let's execute the query, and it is going to return me the current date. Okay, and just like you can add or subtract a value to the now function, similarly you can add and subtract a value to a current date function. Let's add a value of 1 to the current date, execute the query and see the output, and you can see that it has added 1 to the extreme left value, which was date in this case, and now the date has changed from 20 to 21. So when you add a value to current date or the now function, it adds the value to the extreme left value of the return date. So this is how you can use different date manipulation functions to manipulate and extract different formats of date. And this is all for this video. Thank you.